In this video we're going to be looking at the topic of market failure. So what do we mean when we talk about market failure? Well, we don't mean that the market stops working altogether. What we really mean is, when we talk about market failure, is that there are situations in which the market does not produce the best outcome for society as a whole. Maybe the price mechanism fails to allocate resources efficiently, or maybe it allocates resources in such a way that there is a loss of social welfare, a loss of well-being for the society as a whole. So when we talk about market failure in economics, what we mean is that the competitive outcome of markets is not really satisfactory from the point of view of society as a whole. So market failure can take many different forms, and in this video we're going to look at some of them, and we're going to look at the remaining types in the next video. And in our third video this week, we're going to look at the kinds of things that governments do to try and minimise the damage done by that market failure, or to try and eradicate it, if you like. Okay, so we can think about market failure as being complete or partial. Now again, when we talk about complete market failure, I'm not saying that the whole market stops working and nothing works at all. What I mean by complete market failure is that there are situations where the market just simply does not provide particular products, and we have this idea of a missing market, something that isn't provided at all by the forces of supply and demand. On the other hand, partial market failure occurs when the market does actually function, but maybe it produces the wrong quantity of the product, either too much or too little, or maybe it provides it at the wrong price. And remember here, what we're talking about is not the wrong quantity from my point of view or your point of view, not the wrong quantity or price from the point of view of a particular business, but the wrong quantity or price from the perspective of society as a whole. So, we're going to start by thinking about complete market failure. And remember, we said this is all about missing markets. And where a good is not provided at all by the forces of supply and demand, by the market mechanism, we call these goods public goods. So one example of a public good is street lighting. Now, street lighting, imagine if the government didn't provide street lighting. Imagine if I had to go out and buy my own street lights. Well, that would be okay for me. It might cost me a lot of money, but at least I would have some light outside of my house. The problem is, if I put that light up, I will use that light, but my use of that light doesn't reduce the amount of light that's available for my neighbours or for passers-by to use, but they haven't paid for it. So where's my incentive to spend money on a street light if everyone else can use it? I can't exclude them. Once I've put that street light up, I can't exclude anyone from benefiting from it. And so all of those other people, my neighbours, people just going past, they get to use the street light without paying for it. We call them free riders. I've got no incentive to buy it, so I'm probably not going to bother. And because of that, that's the reason why governments tend to provide street lights, because private individuals just wouldn't bother. And the same is true for defence forces, isn't it? If the government did not provide any defence forces, no army or anything, and I felt that my country was under threat, would it be sensible for me to go out and buy a soldier to stand outside my house? Well, probably not, because that's one soldier is probably not enough to protect me. And again, if that soldier is protecting my road, my house, that soldier is probably going to protect my neighbours as well, and they haven't paid for it, so where's my incentive? And we can think the same thing is true really for the police forces, isn't it? So these are public goods. These are the kind of goods that really are not provided by the market at all, and goods which, if we want them, they really have to be provided by the government. So that's complete market failure. What we're going to look at now is what we call partial market failure, and I want to start that by just looking at this little video which gives us a really good example of one type of partial market failure.
People are fatter than ever. Obesity has more than doubled since 1980. But the biggest rise is in the developing world. Anyone with a body mass index, or BMI, over 30 is considered obese. The higher your BMI, the greater your risk of developing weight-related diseases like diabetes and heart disease. Nearly half of the world's overweight and obese children under 5 years old live in Asia. And in Africa, the number of overweight children under 5 has increased by nearly 50% since 2000. Hunger still blights many parts of the world, but the share of people who do not have enough to eat is in decline. Globally, 1 in 9 people suffer from chronic undernourishment. 1 in 10 are obese. If current trends continue, the share of obese children will surpass the number of undernourished by 2022. Africa has the fastest growing middle class in the world. A move from traditional foods to high-calorie fast food and a more sedentary lifestyle is driving the rise in obesity. Fast food outlets like KFC and McDonald's have seen rapid growth on the continent. Women appear to be most affected. More than half of women in Botswana are overweight. Ethiopia, known for its terrible famine, has seen obesity rates in women rise by 600% since 1984. Health systems in Africa, more focused on treating malnourishment and diseases like malaria and HIV, are ill-equipped to deal with obesity-related illnesses like heart disease and diabetes. Pacific Islands have the highest obesity rates in the world, thanks to the spread of Western fast food. Diets, which a generation ago largely consisted of fish and coconuts, are now dominated by processed meat. Nauru is top of the list. 61% of the population are obese, making this tiny paradise island the world's fattest nation. Cook Islands take second place with an obesity rate of 56%, and Marshall Islands come in third with 53%. The Middle East is also in the grip of an obesity crisis. In Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Kuwait, more than a third of the population is obese. Obesity is already a global epidemic and is rapidly spreading from the rich world to the poor.
So, what we saw in that video was that obesity is a prime example, really, of partial market failure. Fatty foods, fast foods, sugary foods, all of those things that make us overweight, we call those demerit goods. And we call them demerit goods because they tend to be over-provided by the market mechanism. Now remember, if I'm eating too many beef burgers, I may not think that's over-provided. However, from the point of view of society as a whole, it is an over-provision. Why? Because those demerit goods have negative externalities. In other words, they have a cost to society that's greater than what I had to pay for them, my own private cost. So when I buy a burger, or maybe 3 or 4 or 5 burgers, in that cost, it doesn't pay for the health care that I might later need as a result of being obese. And in the UK, it's the government, the taxpayer, who pays for that health care. So that's a direct cost to society. If perhaps I can't work because of my obesity and I have to claim welfare benefits, that's a cost to society. That isn't factored into the price when I buy my beef burger or my sugary foods or my sugary drinks. So we call things like this demerit goods. They're over-provided by the market mechanism when we think about it from the perspective of society as a whole. And they have these negative externalities. And it's not just fast food. Take tobacco, for example. When you buy cigarettes, you do pay a big tax in most countries on those cigarettes, but is that really enough to cover the cost of your healthcare if you fall ill as a result? And what about the people who are standing next to you or around you when you're smoking? They're inhaling your cigarette smoke. And we know now from research that passive smoking is linked very strongly to respiratory diseases and asthma. So there is a cost to society there. It has negative externalities. Alcohol, similarly. And it's not just health costs with alcohol that is a negative externality. Often when people drink too much, they don't behave very well. And that can cause problems not just for the health service, but also for the police service. And again, there's a cost to that. Someone has to pay for those police. It's a cost to society that isn't reflected when you pay the price for your pint of beer. How about when you fill your car up with petrol and you drive around? Again, the pollution that comes from that has been linked to lots of asthma, respiratory diseases, those kinds of things. It's got negative externalities, cost to society. The same with pollution. And how about when you buy that bottle of water and you throw the plastic bottle away? Do we really pay for the cost of cleaning up the world's beaches when we do that? No. Someone, somewhere, some society has to pay for that. It's a negative externality. So partial market failure, one thing we think about is these demerit goods which are over-provided by the market mechanism or maybe provided at too low a price, and they're goods that have these negative externalities. They have a social cost that's greater than the private cost. However, as well as demerit goods, we also think about merit goods when we talk about partial market failures. And merit goods tend to be good things. But they're good things that really, in our societies, we would like everyone to have. The problem with the market is it tends to underprovide these good things. And that's a problem not just for me. If I can't afford to buy healthcare, for example, that is a problem for me, isn't it? But maybe it's also a problem for society. If I can't afford to get a vaccination against the flu, maybe I'm going to pass that on to someone else. And therefore that's a market failure that we can't all have healthcare. So merit goods are the opposite to demerit goods. They tend to be underprovided by the market mechanism and they have positive externalities. They have a benefit to society that's greater than the private benefit. So what are we talking about specifically when we think about merit goods? Well, healthcare, as we've just mentioned, but there are others, aren't there? What about public transport? Public transport is a benefit to the whole of society because it enables people to move around to do different jobs. It enables businesses to move their goods around the country. And it stops everyone being in their own individual private car, which in turn cuts down pollution. So they have positive externalities. They have benefits to society as a whole. How about universities? You're paying for your education, and when you graduate, you will get a great benefit from that. You will get a private benefit that's come to you because there was a private cost to you. However, when you go back to your country, with your great education, you will get a great job and you will make a positive contribution to your society, and there will be a social benefit that comes out of your education. Is that really reflected in the cost? Should your education have been cheaper or even free so that society can benefit from it? Arguably yes, but the market will underprovide. So we've looked at demerit goods that produce negative externalities, and we've looked at merit goods that produce positive externalities. So what have we learnt overall? Well, we've learnt that market failure happens when the outcome of a free market is different from what is best for society as a whole. We've learnt that the free market is never going to provide public goods because there's not really any incentive for individuals to pay for them because we can't stop other people using them. We've learned that merit goods have social benefits positive externalities, but they tend to be underprovided by the market mechanism. So we would like everyone in society to have a good education and a good healthcare, but they can't always afford it. And on the other hand, we've learned that demerit goods have social costs or negative externalities. Demerit goods tend to be over-provided by the market mechanism, and the cost that we pay for them doesn't necessarily pay for those problems, those negative externalities. Okay, as ever, there are a few questions for you to answer.